You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Incoming transmission.
Listening to the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. The new conservative resistance begins right here, right now.
Allied reinforcements have arrived from the west.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, the new millennial conservative resistance does indeed begin right here, right now with you. You are listening to the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. And today, folks, ladies and gentlemen, is the 17th of March, Sunday, in the year of our Lord, 2019, and this is the final transmission of the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been an incredible ride. Almost 100 shows. So you think we got pretty close to that. I got to take a look. Did we actually hit 100 shows? This might be show 100. I mean that would, how crazy would that be? But no, we're not going away. We're not going to go quietly into that good night here at the HoloNet. No. It was announced on social media this past week that the HoloNet has been invited to join our fellow Lanterns alumni at the mighty Mojo 50. So again, that's Mojo 50 Network, the legacy of the late great Michael Doc Thompson. And to be perfectly frank, I could not be more honored, more thrilled to be able to say that today, that we get to join such great patriots. Such a stellar lineup that includes Stephen Airy, Dylan Lyles of the Defenders of American Exceptionalism, formerly of Lanterns Media Network, now Defenders Live on Mojo 50. Watson Prunier of the Battle for Freedom. Blake Johnson, formerly of the BJP, the Blake Johnson Program, now of Loud and Clear with Blake Johnson on the Mojo 50. Don't forget, Brad Staggs hosts the Daily Mojo, the former flagship show, still the flagship show, but formerly hosted by the late great Doc Thompson. You also have the Rants of Izzo, the Morse Code with Brandon Morse, and the Sam Sorbo Show. So we're joining a very distinguished lineup at Mojo 50. And do I have mixed emotions about the situation? Of course. Of course. First and foremost, I need to give my deepest thanks and recognition to Chris Pillier and the original team at the Lanterns Media Network. By the way, I did check, this will be the 95th show. I have to give such great thanks to Chris Pillier and the team at Lanterns for taking a chance on a former Blaze contributor whose big dream was to be on the radio and to be on podcast, and seeing that there is more to me than there is to me, and it's kind of odd. It's my production qualities have gotten better and better. If you can't see behind me, if you're not watching on Facebook, YouTube, or BitChute, actually finally got a green screen. It looks. I know it's spazzing out a little bit because I'm still working out the kinks, but I actually got a green screen now, so I'm able to accomplish the more professional production values that people come to look for now online. And I know the show has gotten a lot better. Our production qualities have increased as far as the audio are concerned. My own presenting quality has increased over the years, at least I would like to say. At least I would hope. But you can all be the judge of that. And I want to invite all of you listening to the sound of my voice right now, regardless of what source, whether you're on iHeart, TuneIn Radio, Player.fm, Spotify, SoundCloud, Spreaker, however you are listening to the HoloNet right now, however I am reaching you to join me on Mojo 50. The show is going to be moving from a Sunday to a Saturday program. We are going to be at 7 p.m. Eastern, which right now is 4 p.m. Pacific. And we're going to go out the same way we came in. We're going to go out commenting on the news and the stories that you're not going to ordinarily hear about in the American mainstream. We started on the 26th of January. And we started, God, that's 2 years ago, the 26th of January, with the dawn of the Trumpian age. And I'm going to archive all the old shows if you want to go back and listen to all the old shows. I'll find a way to keep those up for you on theholonet.com. www.theholonet.com is going to still remain home of the show, but you'll also be able to find it now on mojo50.com. But we started out with the dawn of the Trumpian age, and here we are 2 years later together. 2 years, 95 shows, over 100 hours of broadcast. I know we have 481 follows on Spreaker. I have over 500 on Facebook. And I can't thank you all enough because all of you made this possible. You know, this special order HoloNet polo shirt, I'm going to give this a place of honor in my collection of old work uniforms, and I'm going to get myself some Mojo gear. But I'm just so honored and so proud of what we've been able to accomplish on this little podcast. So, enough on the housekeeping. We're going to get right to it. We're going to jump in. Got a couple of stories we need to talk about. Of course, we do need to talk about the obligatory story, the shooting in New Zealand. The terrorist attack in New Zealand. A lot of people on the left are criticizing the mainstream media and the right for not calling this a terrorist attack because the shooter was a white man. I am going to come right out and join the likes of Steven Crowder with Louder and Crowder and say, yes, this was absolutely, unequivocally a terrorist attack. I'm not going to give the man's name. I'm not going to pull up his manifesto. No link will be in the description to his twisted, abjectly evil manifesto or the video that was shot, so seek elsewhere for those. But I will say, our hearts and minds and prayers must be bent on New Zealand tonight, to the families of the innocent victims that were gunned down in cold blood as they worshipped on Friday. Now, I have been critical of Islamists and of Sharia law supporters. I've been very critical of political Islam throughout my whole career, my whole writing career, and my talk career as well. I believe, as Dr. Zuhdi Jasser has put it so many times, that there is a need for a reformation in that faith. And that there are many who do behave in a reformed manner. I grew up with wonderful Muslim people in my home state of New Jersey. I went to school with them, played at their houses, lived down the block. There were a number of Egyptian families that I grew up with that were very devout in their faith. And they were good, honorable people. Proud Americans. And Americans always, and first. And they were equally as terrified and heartbroken by the 9/11 attacks as I was when we looked at it from barely 10 miles away to the northeast as the cloud of dust and debris blew over our town, which was only about 10-15 miles away from lower Manhattan as the crow flies. We all shared that terror equally, and that heartbreak equally among us. So for someone to point to a religion as a whole as their enemy, I cannot agree with you. I will point to the political ideology of Islamism, or the Islamist ideology, that calls for all governments to become theocratic, oppressive regimes ruled by Sharia law. I will lock arms and I will defend against that. But I will never suggest that people of the Islamic faith should be persecuted, lest gunned down amidst their peaceful worship. I didn't think I was going to have to go into this and defend conservatism, but that's what the left wants. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what the shooter, the terrorist who smirked in court and flashed a white power symbol, according to the mainstream media, a white power symbol, because we know how there are a million white power symbols out there. But the man was an absolute avowed ethno-nationalist. The man was a white supremacist. There can be no doubt, having looked at the materials presented that he gave, this was a twisted and evil man. And may God's justice be done to him. The big story that has followed, there have been numerous big stories, but the big story that followed today was Chelsea Clinton. Chelsea Clinton, the daughter of President Bill Clinton, as reported by The Blaze, attended a vigil, or at least she tried to, at New York University to show respect for the victims of the horrible massacre in New Zealand, but pro-Muslim activists used the opportunity to berate her for calling out the anti-Semitism of Representative Ilhan Omar. Clinton apologized, but the activists continued to blame her, condemning Representative Ilhan Omar's anti-Semitic remarks in Congress. What kind of mental gymnastics do we have to go through here? They're blaming Chelsea Clinton's criticism of Representative Ilhan Omar for the attack that claimed 49 lives in New Zealand. Never mind that the killer was most assuredly not a conservative. Never mind the fact that, by his own admission, this attack had been in the works for 2 years. Never mind that it was inspired by another mass murderer in Europe, and that his radicalization occurred during his time in France. No, none of that's relevant. Instead, because it's politically convenient and expedient to create headlines, we're going to blame Chelsea Clinton, who, by the way, I have no love lost for Chelsea Clinton. Neither does President Trump, who rose this morning in defense of Chelsea Clinton. This is the insanity that we're living in, and this is what this killer, this terrorist, this piece of human filth was seeking to foment and increase. He was seeking, through his actions, through his attack, to bring about a racial and cultural war. We must, in defiance of him, do everything we can to prevent this. We must join together around what is good. I applaud Chelsea Clinton for attempting to show respect for the victims and show solidarity with them. I think that is a good and noble move from someone with whom I very seldom agree. And I think it is despicable that this horrific slaughter of innocent people is being politicized in this way. The exact quote is the caucasity that Chelsea Clinton has showing up to a vigil for the 49 Muslims massacred in an Islamophobic hate crime after stoking Islamophobia and racism surrounding Ilhan Omar. No one was stoking Islamophobia and racism surrounding Ilhan Omar. We've condemned her, Chelsea Clinton and Kudu, we've condemned her for her flagrant anti-Semitism. These are not the same. Are you suggesting that Islam is by definition anti-Semitic? Because I can point to several passages in the Quran which would seem to agree with that statement. Other people tweeted similar grievances against Clinton. A lot of students feel uncomfortable. People haven't forgotten the Islamophobic mob she incited against Ilhan Omar. There's no sense of responsibility. That's because Chelsea Clinton was in no way responsible for the events in New Zealand. There is no psychological stretch, no logic that you can build or construct that would suggest that the daughter of President Clinton was in any way responsible for the events in New Zealand. This fails the logic test, folks. Not at all helpful or healing to see Chelsea Clinton at the ICNYU vigil for victims of the New Zealand mosque shooting after she piled on to the racist and Islamophobic smear campaign against Ilhan Omar just a few days ago, tweeted Mohammed Khan with a picture of Clinton. This is abjectly insane. That this event is being used as political fodder. It's disgusting. And that the blood of 49 innocent people is being used to wash away a scandal in our Congress carried out by two very popular Democratic congresswomen who happen to be Muslim. Is that what we're seeing here? Is that the trade that we're seeing here? That anyone who criticized Ilhan Omar for her anti-Semitic remarks, not for her faith, not for her wearing of the hijab in the halls of Congress, which a special dispensation to the rules of Congress was made for, but for her anti-Semitic remarks, that those are now washed away because of a horrific slaughter and massacre that occurred to 49 Muslim worshippers in New Zealand. Is that what's going on here? Because I'm sorry, it just doesn't pass the sniff test. Now, if you want to get a very expletive-laden, but I believe very excellent response to the New Zealand massacre, I would suggest checking out the YouTube channel of Magog of Morskar. Link will be in the description. And you can also check out the response from Steven Crowder, which was a very hot take. It looked like he shot it on his phone first thing in the morning while he was drinking his coffee. I declined to jump online and make any kind of an official statement or make a tweet about this. I believe I retweeted Governor Doug Ducey's statement because I found it to be very apt, so I will read it now to you. Governor Doug Ducey of Arizona, whom I often do not agree with, but I agree with in this, said, "Our prayers and our hearts are with the people of New Zealand this morning, following the horrific mosque attacks in Christchurch. Arizona and America stand with you. We condemn this tragic and hateful act. May God look over the family of all those who lost their lives. I think Doug Ducey said it very well, and I didn't see as I needed to or could say it any better than that. So, on to other things. There's a few things that we haven't been paying attention to that we really should. We've been so absorbed in the horrific story of this massacre in New Zealand that we may have been blind to other things that are moving. This past week, something I've been following very closely, as many of you know, I tend to follow Brexit, EU, and UK events. So now, with the bottom of this half hour, let's shoot over to the pond and talk about Brexit. All right, we shoot over the pond. We're going to Reuters report. Arch-Eurosceptic Farage leads a march over the Brexit betrayal. For those of you who do not know, over the past week there were several votes in the UK Parliament, wherein, first and foremost, a second referendum was struck down soundly in the UK. There will not be a second referendum in the UK over Brexit. Furthermore, a no-deal Brexit was taken completely off the table in what many would suggest is a catastrophically bad negotiating tactic by Parliament. This basically takes the only bullet they had left out of the gun. So now they are in the unenviable position of being at the mercy of the EU. And finally, a vote was cast by Parliament with largely Labour support under Jeremy Corbyn to delay Brexit. So the UK will not be exiting the EU as scheduled on the 29th of this month. No, they will remain in the EU for at least 3 more months at the staggering, jaw-dropping bill of approximately £1 billion per month for 3 months in order to drag their feet and delay in the hopes that they can reach some kind of agreeable accord with the EU, despite the fact that they have completely given up their only point of leverage, which was the threat of a no-deal Brexit. This, ladies and gentlemen, is negotiating to lose by design. The only acceptable outcome for the Labour Party is that Article 50, which is the instrument which would remove UK from the EU and achieve Brexit, is revoked, and that Britain defies the democratic vote of their people and remains in the European Union. That is the end game goal. As it stands now, it looks like Britain, if it does remain within the EU, will be in a very unenviable position globally. With their own people, it will absolutely spell the end of the conservative government helmed by Theresa May. And if they choose to leave EU under these negative terms, Britain will be a client state of the EU with no economic freedom, no ability to legislate or influence the laws that control their country. Britain will be Europe's slaves. They will be a client state, a puppet of Brussels. So now that we're up to speed, in Sunderland, England, Nigel Farage, this happy-looking fellow right here, led a campaign He is the politician who probably did more than anyone else to force Britain's referendum on membership of the European Union. He joined protesters at the start of a 270-mile march over what they call a betrayal of the Brexit vote. Carl Benjamin, known online as Sargon of Akkad, also had a live broadcast from this rally. You can find that on YouTube. The march comes after another tumultuous week for Prime Minister Theresa May, in which Parliament overwhelmingly rejected her divorce deal for a second time, and lawmakers voted to seek a delay in Britain's exit from the EU, as we discussed. In the pouring rain in Sutherland, northeast England, which was the first place in Britain to declare a vote to leave the EU, Farage, wearing a flat cap and carrying an umbrella, said Brexit was now in danger of being scuttled by the establishment. Farage said, "We are here in the very week when Parliament is doing its utmost to betray the Brexit result." Farage said, "It is beginning to look like it doesn't want to leave, and the message from this march is if you think you can walk all over us, we will march straight back to you." The march, which began with about 100 people, is due to end at Parliament on March 29th, the day the UK was supposed to leave the EU. Britain's crisis over EU membership is approaching its finale as May continues to fight to build support for her divorce deal, which is expected to be put before lawmakers for the third time next week. Many Brexit supporters in her own party oppose the deal, saying it ties Britain too closely to the EU. May has given those critics an ultimatum: ratify her deal by Wednesday or face a delay to Brexit way beyond June 30th that would open up the possibility the entire departure from the EU could ultimately be thwarted. Ladies and gentlemen listening to the sound of my voice, if that should happen, we will see civil disobedience and disorder and disruption and unrest in England that has not seen the like since the Troubles in Ireland 20-30 years ago, or the Irish Civil War of the early 20th century. This is going to be utter bedlam. The Brits have had it. And rightly so. They took a fever-pitched referendum that divided the country, kind of similarly to how the Trump election divided ours, come think of it. And the government is choosing to ignore the will of the people. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a glimpse of what we could see here in the United States if the wall is not built. Because make no mistake, Brexit was a literal referendum calling for the exit of the UK from the EU. The election of President Donald J. Trump was equally as much of a referendum. The president ran on and was elected on a mandate to build the wall and end the crisis at the border. A crisis which this week, Congress, both houses, voted to declare non-existent. In bipartisan bills, both the House and Senate voted to revoke the president's declaration of a national emergency, which President Trump, in his first veto of his presidency, nigh 2 years on, made his first veto. We go to that story after we take a quick break. You're listening to the HoloNet Podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. We'll be right back.
little down, and her head went round and round. She thought I was okay, so she stepped off that train with a high hat, a piccolo, and a cane.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Allied reinforcements have arrived from the west.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The millennial conservative resistance begins here.
Oh, yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, the new millennial conservative resistance does begin right here, right now, with you. You are listening to the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network, our final broadcast on lanterns.buzz. And Today has been remarkable. It has been remarkable, and it's caused me to look back fondly on all the previous shows here on the Lanterns Media Network. And if you would like to follow us in our transition over to the mighty Mojo 50 and join with Jackhole Nation, I would love for all of the HoloNet operatives out there to join with the Mojo 50 Jackholes. You can certainly find us. We're going to be on mojo50.com, streaming on iHeartRadio, and also wherever all great podcasts are found. TuneIn, iHearts, iTunes, still on YouTube, BitChute, Spreaker, SoundCloud, and everywhere else great podcasts and radio shows are found. So again, that's facebook.com/HoloNet on Facebook, at the HoloNet on Twitter, and mojo50.com and holonet.com. Now we go to Breitbart. Donald Trump vetoes attempt to block national emergency. This is by Charlie Spearing. President Donald Trump vetoed a bill designed to block his emergency declaration at the southern border on Friday in a ceremony at the White House. "Today I am vetoing this resolution," Trump said. "Congress has the freedom to pass this resolution, and I have the duty to veto it, and I'm very proud to veto it." The president defied Speaker Nancy Pelosi, congressional Democrats, and, quote, dirty dozen Senate Republicans who joined them by signing his veto in a public ceremony at the White House. He described the congressional attempt to stop him as dangerous and reckless resolution that was a, quote, vote against reality. Trump said over 1 million illegal aliens were set to rush the southern border, including a 2,000% increase of migrants from Central America trying to claim asylum. The vast majority are rejected, he said, but smuggling operations making a tremendous amount of money like they've never made before are using these people to crash the system. Trump said our immigration system is stretched beyond the breaking point. He also noted that despite record numbers of apprehensions at the border, there was not enough space to detain them all. Side note, this was also confirmed in a very, very now famous letter and statement from the Border Patrol Union that they are being simply overrun. There's absolutely nothing we can do. We're bursting at the seams. You can only hold so much, he said. The only option is to release them, and you can't do that either because when you release them, they come into our society, and in many cases, they're stone-cold criminals. Trump noted 59 different national emergency previous declarations by past presidents that were frequently used to assist foreign countries. Quote, "That's why I say America first. If that's okay, America first." He said the only emergency Congress voted to revoke was the one to protect our own country. So think of that. This is the one they don't want to do, and this is the one perhaps they should most do. Trump was joined by Vice President Pence, Secretary of Homeland Security Kirstjen Nielsen, Attorney General William Barr, as well as members of law enforcement and angel parents. I don't know that I've ever been more proud than to be standing next to your desk than I am today, Pence said, praising the president's decision. Barr described the president's declaration as clearly authorized under the law and consistent with past precedent. The humanitarian and security crisis is exactly the kind of emergency that presidents are permitted to address under the National Emergencies Act. Barr is tasked with defending the declaration in court, and he publicly defended his decision in the Oval Office. Now, the president said he didn't hold it against the 12 Senate Republicans who voted with Democrats to block his declaration. He said, look, we're doing what they have to do. And look, I put no pressure on anybody. I actually said I could have gotten some of them to come along. I said, I want you to vote your heart. Do what you want to do. I'm not putting any pressure. I'll let them know when there's pressure, okay? And I told them that. I said, when I need your vote, I'll let you know. I didn't need their vote because I knew all along it was going to be a veto and one that they will not be able to override. Now, Democrats are, of course, going to attempt to override this veto. However, a veto requires a 2/3 majority in both houses, which they will not have. So as it stands right now, this is a symbolic measure only. The president said the funds repurposed for border defense will include 30-foot bollards and an 18-foot wall. We have many miles under construction right now and will be signing contracts in the next couple of days for literally hundreds of miles of wall. Now, in the past couple of days, I have been online on MeWe. By the way, if you have not yet been on MeWe, you need to check out the HoloNet on MeWe. That's right, we're on the MeWe's because Facebook's going downhill fast. So check us out on MeWe, that is MeWe.com. And this, folks, this is where Mojo50 really loves to hang out. So if you want to chat with us live and interact with the show, I would recommend you check out Mojo50 on MeWe. I was chatting with a few people in the Mojo50 chat. And, I'm not going to full screen that just because people put crazy stuff on there. But I was chatting with people in the Mojo50 chat on MeWe. And there are a lot of mixed opinions about this. A listener by the name of Lori, we call her LBD, she is very, very dead set against the declaration of emergency by the president, feels that it's an unconstitutional power grab. And one of my soon-to-be fellow hosts there, I believe it was Izzo, and also... oh, God, who was in this? It wasn't Whiskey 6. Who was I listening to? Was it the Rants of His? No, it was Matt Locke. I was listening to the Matt Locke show. I didn't mention Matt Locke before. Matt Locke's cool. Matt is the louder Matt now. I am going to be the Matt who's not as loud as Matt Locke. But Matt Locke and LBD were having a great debate on that show. You can listen. It's yesterday. It's Friday's show on the Matt Locke show. It's actually not what his show's bloody called. I don't know the name of all the shows. I believe it was Conservative Cartel with Matt Locke. And they were doing their Freestyle Friday. And LBD and Matt Locke got into a debate about this. And I had to chime in a couple of times in the chat. Even though I'm not technically on air with them yet. I had to say it. And let me see if I can actually give that to you here. If I can read it verbatim, I will. If not, I'll paraphrase myself. But... we have to realize that President Trump's actions are completely in fitting with the National Emergency Law of 1970. This is a law in which Congress delegated one of its powers, a budgetary power, to the President of the United States to declare a national emergency when and if the President needs to act more quickly than the legislative process would allow. Okay? That is the concept of the National Emergency Act, and I believe that's the spirit in which President Trump has utilized it. Okay? So, in that, the president's actions are constitutional, strictly speaking, to the letter of the Constitution. However, the president's actions notwithstanding, the original law that the president is acting under, which is the National Security Law, passed in 1970, I feel that law flies in the face of the spirit of the Constitution of the United States because it is Congress circumventing the separation of powers and the checks and balances of the system. So follow me through that. Are the president's actions unconstitutional? Strictly speaking, no. President Trump's actions in declaring a national emergency are not unconstitutional, nor is his veto of this latest legislation seeking to revoke his state of a national emergency. Neither of these things are unconstitutional. Are they controversial? Absolutely. What I would stress is unconstitutional in my mind is the initial act itself, which is empowering the president. People are going to say I'm going into semantics and I'm splitting hairs here. The end of the day, President Trump's actions are right with the law. At the end of the day. But the law that he is utilizing isn't. So what I think Congress should concentrate on reclaiming its delegated powers back from the executive branch. Congress has delegated away so much of its authority to the presidency, and as a constitutionalist, I say Congress needs to be held responsible to that fact and needs to work hard to bring back their powers. They need to bring back the war powers from the presidency. They need to bring back these national emergency budgetary powers from the presidency. They need to shrink the size of the executive branch of government to reduce regulatory power. And you know who's been doing a better job of that than Congress? President Trump! How insane is that? President Trump, in reducing the regulatory burden, the regulatory power of his own branch, is doing Congress's work for them. He's doing what they're supposed to do. He's reducing the ability of his own branch to circumvent the power of Congress. And that's all great, and everybody loves it, except when it doesn't benefit them. Except when it doesn't benefit them. Another piece in the news that definitely got my attention. Let me see if I can pull it up for you here. Hold what you got. I didn't have this in the actual show plan, but the Department of Education came up in the news. The president's budget slashes the Department of Education's budget. This came out on March 11th. Let's see here. Story by The Atlantic. Wash your hands before picking this up. After, actually. The Trump administration really wants to cut education funding. Congress doesn't. For the third year in a row, lawmakers are expected to disregard the administration's proposed budget. What else is new? On Monday, Donald Trump's administration released its budget proposal for the 2020 fiscal year, and the plan isn't pretty for the Education Department. The proposal requests a roughly $7.1 billion cut in funding for the department compared with 2019, which represents a 10% decrease in the budget. The proposed cut is unlikely to go anywhere. Like past years, Congress is expected to disregard it for the most part. Gee, that's constitutional. Instead, more than anything, the proposal is an exposition of the administration's philosophy on education. It is a state and local issue that the federal government shouldn't have its hands in. Ding, 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 we have a winner. Tell him what he's won. And we go to President Calvin Coolidge.
I want the people of America to be able to work less for the government and more for themselves. I want them to have the rewards of their own industry. This is the chief meaning of freedom. Until we can reestablish a condition under which the earnings of the people can be kept by the people, we are bound to suffer a very severe and distinct curtailment of our liberty.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The voice of wisdom and guidance from a century ago, President Silent Calvin Coolidge. It is absolutely a state and local issue that the federal government shouldn't have its hands in, and as President Coolidge teaches us, We need the American people to have less money to the government and more for themselves. And that is what President Trump is doing in reducing the budget of the Department of Education. Those tax dollars need to go right back to the states, right back to localities, and to parental control. Local parental control. I've got 4 kids. I've got a dog in this fight. At the granular level, the budget requests look similar to the ones released by the administration in 2017 and 2018. It would again eliminate a range of problems such as the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, an incentive program that forgives student loans of public service workers, and there would be steep cuts in the National Institutes of Health, which funds a lot of research in higher education. It would also cut funding to teacher development under Title II, the part of law funding preparation and pathways to develop better teachers. In contrast, the proposed cuts to the budget would increase the amount of spending on federal charter school grants by $60 million. It would keep funding historically black colleges and universities level and expand the availability of Pell Grants to short-term credential programs rather than 2- or 4-year colleges. And this year, the result of the Federal Commission on School Safety, the administration is asking for $100 million for new school safety grants. So somebody find me the bad thing here! Okay? We're reducing spending to programs which benefit the government and people who work for the government and putting more money to enhance the safety of our students and improve charter schools. What? Where's the downside? And again, Congress ignores it. So, on that note, there are 2 stories I can go to from here because, man, this hour just bloody flew by, and I've got about a little under 10 minutes remaining. So, we can go to the people in France setting fires, smashing shops in the Paris riots. Gee, we haven't heard about that before. This is from the AP, Thomas Adamson and Angela Charlton, 2 hours ago. French Yellow Vest protesters set life-threatening fires, smashed up luxury stores, and clashed with police Saturday. In the 18th straight week of demonstrations against President Emmanuel Macron, large plumes of smoke rose above rioting on Paris's landmark Champs-Élysées Avenue, and a mother and her child were just barely saved from a building blaze. The resurgent violence came as protesters are seeking to breathe new life into a movement that seemed to be fizzling and get attention from French leaders and the media, who they see as underplaying their economic justice cause and favoring the elite. So, what is the overarching moral of the story? What is the overarching concept that we can take away from this, the last episode of the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network? When governments act in defiance of the will of their people, the world is darker. We see unrest. We see division, strife, and war. And what are we seeing today? In the UK, Parliament is openly defying the will of the British people and refusing to execute Brexit. In France, the government there is openly defying its people in insisting on more green, eco-centric, huge government spending programs that benefit very few hyper-rich people and have driven the price of gasoline and food through the roof and have driven down employment. Couple that with a massive influx of refugees, which the people have been against, but the government under the EU has been for. Go to Germany, where reactionary elements, the AfD, for example, as we've spoken about before, have become a severe threat to the government of Angela Merkel, to Eastern Europe, in Poland, and in Hungary, where those governments are actually listening to their people and refusing to take in new migrants. to here in the United States, where our president had a true mandate in 2016 to build the wall, reduce illegal immigration, eliminate it if possible, and also reduce the size of government to drain the swamp. And we see our Congress defying the president and defying the will of the people at every turn. Then we look to Venezuela, which is the ultimate example of the government defying its people and being callous and uncaring to the suffering of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of their own citizens, to children dying in the street. It's so easy with these horrific stories like the terrorist attack in Venezuela, in New Zealand, to keep us so wrapped up and so emotionally charged that we don't look at the bigger issues. And I'm not suggesting that we dismiss what happened in New Zealand. No, far from it. What I'm suggesting is that we step back and we seek to prevent what the murdering terrorist in New Zealand wanted to create. We must prevent this massive civil disruption, this unrest, this cold civil war, as we've discussed so many times, from becoming hot. We must allow cooler heads to prevail. If our government refuses to listen to us, we must elect new government. If the government refuses to act to the clearly expressed will of the American people, we must have a wave the likes of which has never been seen in Congress, in state houses, and in governor's offices all across the country, and elect politicians who will listen. In the UK, Parliament must be completely overturned with all new members of Parliament. The Labour Party, the Conservative Party, they must be done with. Elect new members of Parliament, my friends in the UK. Out with the old and in with the new. Before I started the HoloNet podcast, I was looking into a political career of my own, and I continually reposted things online from vote out incumbents. And what I say to you now, in this closing broadcast of the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network, is if your representatives defiantly refuse to execute your will, if they refuse to represent you when you speak so clearly as to take a man who no one thought could ever win the presidency and catapult him into the most powerful seat in the world, if your congressmen and women refuse to listen, vote them out. And use the political system that our founders gifted us through blood and strife and horror beyond our ability to imagine. They gifted us this republic. They gave us a republic. As Benjamin Franklin said, we've given you a republic if you can keep it. We must keep it. In defiance of murderous cowards like the terrorist in New Zealand, in defiance of those who would choose to send us into a socialist quagmire from which civilized Western civilization will never return. We must make DC listen. In UK, you must make Parliament listen. In France, you must make your government listen. Governments must fear their people, and people should never fear their governments. On that note, good night. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. End transmission from Phoenix.